Don't forget to unmute yourselves. There you go.
Perfect, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual session here at AIDSWatch 2020. I hope everyone is well, as best as they can be during these trying times that we have worldwide. Hope you're staying healthy, washing your hands, practicing social distancing. Especially for us as trans and gender nonconforming people. So many things that we deal with that, we want to be extra careful during this time. But thank you. This is our trans networking and advocacy session for AIDSWatch. I myself am Mariah Lester. I'm the Deputy Director of the Transgender Strategy Center, otherwise known as TSC. And we have here Sophia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Cass. I use she, her, and I'm the Positively Trans Program Coordinator at the Transgender Law Center.
Now, just a little bit about TSC. We're a trans-led organization, mostly 75%, I believe, trans individuals of color. We provide support, training, and coaching, and we prioritize Black and Brown trans individuals and grassroots trans-led agencies throughout the country by using a racial, gender, and economic justice framework in order to elevate trans leaders and organizations. And, we believe in our collective goal of achieving trans liberation, and that can only be done through the trust of trans communities and trans leaders in order for us to help each other.
Thanks, Araya. And the Transgender Law Center, we are the largest national trans-led organization in the United States, advocating for self-determination for, we believe that it's for all people, and particularly, of course, for our communities of trans and gender variant and non-binary folks. And our goal is to keep our people alive, thriving, and fighting for liberation. Specifically Positively Trans, or particularly Positively Trans, which I am the coordinator of, we're a constituent-led and constituent-based, so very community-based and driven project. And our goal is to create our network, to advocate for our needs. And the way we do that is through three main picks or tools: storytelling, data and research, and leadership development.
Now we want to hear a little bit about you, everyone who is on this call participating. If you can use the chat box there and put your name, your pronouns, and the location where you're at, and then also share us one thing you would like to share about yourself to our group. You're welcome, Tammy. Quentin Reynolds, welcome. Taviana, welcome. Jason from the Pride Center, welcome. I believe that is, who's that, Luster?
Luster.
Welcome. Terry Lynn. Carson said we have 30 people here in the chat. Oliver, pronouns they, them, theirs, from Columbus, Ohio with Equitas Health. Vince Crisostomo, Maya Williams. Taviana's pronouns are she, her, hers in Atlanta. Jason wants us to know that they want to learn more about trans rights. Jordan King, she, her pronouns in New York with Callan Lord. Bianca, she, her with Callan Lord. Heather Whitridge, she, her, hers, Cascade AIDS Project. Tammy from Iowa. Angelica, they, them from Equitas Health in Akron, Ohio. Coleman, they, them from AIDS Foundation of Chicago. Natalia, she, her from Fort Lauderdale, community member. Maya from NJCRI's Project WOW. Oliver, best friend is a professor at Artebine University in Kiev, they, them. Terry, Oakland, California from World. Reagan, he, him, associate with Transgender Strategy Center.
We have
Quentin
to find that
Reynolds
out.
from Atlanta. Aisha from Sin in New York. May Zarita, 18 years old from Grand Rapids, Michigan, working for the Michigan Organization of Adolescent Sexual Health, all about representing youth voice. Lusters from Columbus, Ohio with Mosaic Program. Jen Laws, he, him, in New Orleans, formerly Fort Lauderdale, Public Health Policy Analyst. Michelle from Puerto Rico, Ola. Sean McIntosh, he, him. Quentin is representing for ASAP individuals. Vince asks, how can allies best support the trans community? Sean McIntosh, AIDS Institute from Tampa. Judy Pedraza, AIDS Center of Queens County, she, her. Wanted the community to know that sadly, Lorena Borjas passed away this morning. Yes, she did. Lorena was founder and executive director of Colectivo Trans Ingrediento. And sadly, she passed away from COVID-19 complications this morning. So our hearts do go out to New York and the community and all of those that are severely affected with friends and family by this terrible disease. BT from Transforming Atlanta, director, he, him pronouns. Jake Armin, he, his pronouns. Los Angeles with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and would like to learn more about transgender rights and how allies and foundations can help trans-led organizations. Natalia says she notices there's an increase of certain clients using trans programs as a revolving door through nationwide. How can we stop this behavior? Well, what we're going to talk about here during this presentation is to have a little conversation about our policy work that we are engaging in nationwide. We want to hear from you about some local policies that you may be working on, programs and organizations that you all work for that are going through a collective effort for some policy change, reform, and also trying to create and provide collaborative opportunities for all of us here. Maybe some collaborations can be created outside of this webinar once we've identified certain policies that we can work with, and especially highlighting national policies that affect all of our lives, trans and gender nonconforming individuals within the United States of America. Maya says, how can we advocate and open the doors for our trans brothers and engage them with activities that build with trans women as a whole? Okay, Sophia, you want to take this one?
Yes, of course. So as Araya mentioned, the design of this session, since it's a networking and advocacy session, is very interactive. So we're really inviting you all to participate through raising your hands. Later on, I'm not sure if you can unmute folks so they can talk as well, folks who want to. And definitely please type in into the chat box if you can. So we're doing two activities, I think, Araya, right? The first, we want to ask you what word or what comes to your mind when you think about policy and the people who work in it. And that's an open-ended question, so you can type in everything and anything appropriate. So Natalia says, not sufficient. May, expectations. Tammy, change makers. May also says administrators or admins. Natalia says lack of study and interest in our community. Reagan says not representative of the population. May says old as well. Jordan says distance in all caps. Sometimes those that creating policy are far removed from real day-to-day lived experiences of our community. Ashe. Hi y'all, Tyra from NJCRI Pride Center. Heather says corruption. Quinton says closed-minded, non-inclusive. Heather also says influenced. And Reagan says affluent. So May says policy versus practice, and that they have a story about this one. If it's not too long and you feel like typing it, would love to read it and share it with everyone.
Yes, we have Carson here from AIDS United, who's our moderator. Carson, what people raise your hands if they would like to speak? Is that an option?
Yeah, so May, if you wanted to raise your hand, we can give you permission to talk. I think I can also scroll down and potentially do that.
Cool.
So May, I just gave you permission to unmute if you want to share your story.
Hello, am I heard? It is awesome to be here today. Yeah, so just quick. Again, Mazarita from Michigan, and a lot of the work I did early on was in high school. I'm 18, so I'm pretty young. And I remember when I was just trying to learn how policy was, it was just me trying to communicate to my school administration about how I want protections as a transgender individual and the transgender people that are in this community. And every time I tried to, or one of the times I had tried to communicate that I want to change in policy or additional policy, they tried to dissuade me and tried to focus me back onto practice. One of the people trying to negotiate with me literally said like, oh, well, it seems like you want something to change in practice. And like, then I had to bring up examples of like, no, if there's not a change in policy, then I don't know it can be fixed in the future. You know, if there's not something set in stone, written down that says, here's how you're supposed to act and here's how you're supposed to respond, then there's no actual progress being made. And that story I keep with me, just to make sure that people aren't telling you like, oh, we're going to be changing practice, we're doing trainings, now I want to see policy being changed, things like that. That's all.
Thank you for sharing, May. To build on your story, on your point, I heard someone once say that, I can't remember who though, that like policy and other tools are really the tools of the master, the tools of the white supremacy that kind of put the system in place. And what we as trans people are doing to advocate for ourselves is to use those tools within that system to revolutionize and change. So thank you for sharing that. Terry Lynn also says outdated. I think they also wrote Ashe. Am I right? Is this? BT says policy, important, needed, more folk need to get involved, but the process can be complicated and intentionally confusing. Exactly. Yes, and this goes back to why it is intentionally confusing. Luster also says, I believe that was Audre Lorde, that quote. Yes, thank you. And now I won't forget.
Tyra says healthcare and pronouns.
Yes, sorry for missing that, Tyra. So I see that the number of attendees is increasing, so I'm gonna tell folks what we're doing. So what we're doing right now is just an interactive activity where people are telling us what comes up to their minds when they think about policy and the people that do policy or that work in policy.
And it sounds like a lot of our responses is based off of like a gatekeeping, like what you said, Sophia, that's mainly from cis white individuals that don't represent our Black and Brown TT&C communities that are, you know, the main ones that we think about when we think about how policy and policymakers and policy change makers. So what's some words that this isn't on the slides, but just to kind of go off of that, what comes to mind when you think of the ways that our community can get more involved into policy?
Just to keep reading, Araya, also Quentin says patriarchy, and Jade, hi Jade, antiquated processes and lack of true representation. And Araya, do you mind repeating your question? Your second?
Yes, what would it take for our Black and Brown communities to be more involved in policy change?
So Tyra says, by showing up honestly, people can't fight for us better than us. Amen to that. Reagan says education on how to get more involved. So we need education on how to be involved with policy. We need more of our people, as Tyra mentioned, to show up and be involved.
And if you're not able to type it out, you can always raise your hand to be unmuted to speak.
Yeah. Maya says being more vocal with local legislators and learning the language of policyholders to advocate for the trans community. So back to learning the tools. Showing up to have your voice heard and talking to legislators. That's Quentin. Julio, understanding the dynamics of power and budgets. I think Luster has something to say.
Yes, thank you. While I agree that people do need to show up, we need to show up. What I have been really leaning into is that we have to even have the conversation to understand that is a viable option for us and to understand what that means. We tell people to show up and they show up in droves because of that kind of group and whatever mentality. But if you talk to people individual, they don't know why necessarily they're there. They don't know that medicine or our voices or legislation has even shifted in a way to give them hope. You know, I'm running into trying to get people into leadership programs when we don't understand ourselves necessarily even as a leader.
Thank you for saying that, Luster, and bringing this up. So when you were talking, I added exploring what we don't know and how we can get that information and training. Jordan says that speaking from my own experience, Callan Lord led an 8-week trans femme advocacy skill building group. It was hugely beneficial. We did role play exercises of speaking directly with policymakers. Amazing. Julio also says, I think it was the same sentence. So understanding the dynamics of power and budgets are important in understanding how policy is to be delivered and communicated. That is absolutely correct. Jen says, we sometimes focus on tearing down the system of oppression. Another way to change the rules policy is to get super familiar with them, learn how to use those rules to our advantage. May says we must hashtag exist loudly. Love it. BT also says inviting folks to attend events, use layman terms, demystify the process. I don't know what layman terms is, so if you can explain that, BT, that would be awesome.
Layman terms would be in a simplified terminology that most general people would be able to understand, instead of using acronyms and words that are of a more privileged standpoint that kind of boxes other people out of understanding.
Cool. Thanks, Araya. And I think also BT put non-academic what she said. Jen says, Robert's rules of order are super boring. I agree. But knowing when you can shut down someone who is oppressing you is super fun. I also agree that it's fun. Jade says, I truly believe several types of training for folks that is tailored to meet people where they are. Also creating and demanding spaces that are affirming for folks to engage in policy conversation. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the theme that I see popping up here is one, what we don't know part, right? And training our people and getting our people equipped. And the second part is the training to actually do the action, tell our stories, advocate for our policy needs. Am I right?
Yes, that's what I'm looking at too. If individuals, if you know of programs or if your organization offers these types of trainings like the Callan Lord program that was spoken about earlier, can you please place the names of that into the chat as well so that we can all have that as a resource, and then also put if it's local or national.
Great.
Okay, we have something here in Spanish. I believe is we need to integrate the trans into, I believe, the policy change or conversations in Puerto Rico.
So I just used Google Translate. We must integrate the trans and the Congress both in Puerto Rico and India. So I think what they're saying is we should elect and have more trans representatives. Jordan also says it was offered internally by Callan Lord, but I think could be offered at other programs. Thanks, Jordan. Tyra also says we need more of the transgender community to work in corporate world and not just desk jobs. How can people want us to be leaders without being led by our brothers and sisters that are leading? Thanks, Tyra. Jordan also says something to work on. I will go back to the, sorry, that's something to work on. They will go back to the team at Callan Lord to suggest this may be made available to others. Thanks, Jordan. And May also agrees with the trans representation statement in public offices. I think I'm running in 2040 for Michigan governor, by the way. Yay! Make sure to share once we get there, your page and all of that. Cool. Shall we move to activity 2?
Sounds good. And
Araya, do you want me to take this too, or?
Yeah, go ahead. About policy work.
Cool.
That's your gambit.
Also, I really don't want to miss any of the comments. So BT says in the Atlanta area, there are many orgs that teach and share workshops, lobby days, Spark, Southerners on the Ground, or SONG, Project South, Georgia Equality. Thanks, BT, for lifting that up. All right, so the second activity is what policy work are you working on locally or nationally at the moment? And what policies do you think need more attention for our communities? So twofold, what you're working on and what you think needs more attention. And as we mentioned before, you can either type, raise your voice, and we'll raise your hand, sorry, and we'll unmute you so you can participate. Carson, I can't see if anyone raised their hand.
No one's raising their hand yet, but I imagine people are typing out all of the many things that they are doing in the chat box right now.
Cool.
Perfect. You can either answer both or one of the questions. What policy work are you working on, either locally or nationally? And what policies need more attention from TG&C communities?
Hello. Hi, it's me, May, again. The main work that my organization does, MOASH, the Michigan Organization for Adolescent Sexual Health, is just making sure that youth, especially queer youth or all youth, have a level of independence and autonomy in their own healthcare access, especially when it's coming to sexual health. A lot of that is integrated with parents having a lot of control, and we're trying to mitigate that and trying to break down and trying to get more progress towards youth having a little bit more voice in their own health. So the policies we're working towards that is just making sure confidentiality and youth know their rights and trying to expand their rights and give them more rights. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Especially, it's mostly in Michigan right now. That's the work I'm doing.
Yay for bodily autonomy. Thank you, May. I see Jen saying, data collection policies have been a priority for me in Florida and nationally. So they're answering the first question. We keep getting into the trap of, quote, we don't see a need for this, so we won't fund it, end quote. And without the funding, we can't gather the data. Right now, we're highly reliant on private funding to generate data. I totally agree with you on the data piece, and some folks use the term data desert when it comes to the healthcare and well-being of trans people. And this is where initiatives like, for example, Positively Trans, we've done a needs assessment for trans people of color living with HIV. So if you go to transgenderlawcenter.org, Positively Trans, they're all up there, and they will also pinpoint the needs of the community. I know that there's another data also published by the National Center for Transgender Excellence, which is the 2015 US Trans Survey. That's also available on their website. But that being said, I do agree that there's need for more data to inform our policy priorities. And Tammy says modernizing HIV-specific laws around the nation. Luster says, second question, overall implementation beyond the urban centers, rural TG&C non-binary folks more often than not. BT says, we, Transforming in Georgia, is working on getting the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicle, to stop asking for letters of SRS to change gender marker on driver's license, and also ask them to consider allowing non-binary folks to choose or a blank or X. That is like perfectly said. And if you look actually in the brief, in the advocate brief, BT, this is one of the main asks that we want our representatives to know, that, we don't need to present proof of any surgery so we can change our name and gender markers. Tyra Gardner also says, NJCRI and other HIV orgs working with Governor Phil Murphy to pass the New Jersey Task Force to end the HIV epidemic. To pass the New Jersey Task Force to end the HIV epidemic, the work to map out New Jersey's plan to end the HIV epidemic by 2025 began to take form. Amazing. The work of the task force focused on 4 ambitious but achievable goals by 2025. New Jersey will reduce the rate of new HIV infections by 75%, ensure that 100% of people living with HIV/AIDS know their status, and ensure that 90% of people living with HIV/AIDS are virally suppressed. We need everyone to help us meet these goals. We can contribute to the success of these goals while we wait on the plan. Tag someone you know or invite them to like us and ask them to get involved. Hashtag NJENDSHIV 2025. Hashtag ENDAIDS, New Jersey Department of Health. That's amazing. So basically here we're talking about HIV policy or plan to end the epidemic in New Jersey and the goals that folks have set for themselves.
Which is really important, especially with the administration now. You know, there were a lot of policies that were formed to try to erase our communities, either in word or in action. So in order to inject ourselves within the ending the epidemic national response, we really have to be proactive and come together. Go ahead, Sophia.
Thanks, Araya. Quentin also says, HIV sexual health research and prevention, inclusion for trans, non-binary, and especially for AFAB or assigned female at birth individuals are often forgotten due to the negative stigma and assumptions. I also agree. So another recurrent theme I see is data and research. Maya Williams also says, I specifically work with LGBT youth and adolescent health. One thing we are working on is allowing trans youth to access hormones at a younger age with consent of parents and also by themselves, so bodily autonomy. Most children know specifically who they are. So with the support of family and friends, we are building outlets and access to adolescents, youth to access hormone therapy, along with access to PrEP and PEP. So access may be a third theme that I'm also seeing. Luster said, do not, maybe that's a continuation of another sentence. Luster is, so I think it was second question overall, implementation beyond the urban centers, rural TGNC non-binary folks more often than not do not benefit from policies and legislations. So expanding our, when we talk about the trans community, to actually be inclusive of everyone in the trans community. May says, following up on the data question, will the census tell us any extra info on transgender people? To my knowledge, and having filled out the census, it gives you only 2 options, if I'm not mistaken. And so the answer would be no. And it's not.
Yes, just race and ethnicity is listed on there, and age. Nothing about any type of LGBTQ representation or identification.
Yeah, thanks, Araya. Natalia says access to sexual health services and to updated HIV laws since they are outdated in Florida. Totally agree. And BT also says, we're also doing a campaign with Close the Jail Atlanta Amen Alliance and others asking governor and prison administration to release folks out of jails, prisons, and transition centers without COVID-19, but definitely during COVID-19. So maybe a 5th theme is detention and our people who are in prisons and how we work on Ryan, can you help me with the expungement, right? That's the word, okay.
There you go.
Jen also says at May, No, unfortunately, despite allies advocating for us, this admin removed those questions. I think this was also about the census. And finally, Natalia says unmet housing disparities among key populations. So the kind of answering what fields we're working on and what need more attention. Jen also says important to qualify access to care, meaningful access matters. Overcoming barriers of funding, address requirements, competency failures. I think we need to be specific about what access looks like. Exactly. I think someone before, when we were talking about the laws and the policy, said that like how on purpose it's complicated and inaccessible. And I think that some of the access policies are also inaccessible and complicated on purpose. So I totally agree with you, Jen, about how to, when we say access, it's actually an accessible access, like form of access. Okay. Araya, can you read BT while I translate Michelle?
Yes, BT says nationally, we need to fight all of the anti-trans bills that have popped up since 45 got into office. Very important. And make sure that they don't last beyond this administration at the very least.
Michelle says we need more trans workers in politics to show their faces for the community and to have girls trained to work for the community and become health professionals. So professional training, not just for people to be become politicians or become elected officials, but also training for more people to become health professionals.
And we have here at Callan Lord, they're working on decriminalizing sex work and repealing New York State loitering laws that are used to target trans folks who trade sex. Teresa says, yes, we must fight each one of them. And Jordan says, completely agree with that sentiment, Sophia.
Cool.
Now we know that, of course, all of these need as much help as possible, but of the points that were already given for current work that you are working on, is there any where you're not really getting much of any support from the community? Maybe just a couple of you out there, you know, soldiering forward and trying to pass things that needs more attention? Natalia says, yes, more advocates for young trans populations in the school and early access to transition in the medical field as well, and the law and protection. And that would be specifically in Florida, but also a national issue. Jen says, regular competition for funding with larger and broader LGBT orgs for trans-specific funding and programming. We really need those target organizations to not do that, for funders to not give trans-specific funding without specific program designs that prioritize trans people to manage these programs. And Tyra says, definitely that fact that people can be misgendered in the healthcare services. BT gives Jen an amen, which is quite correct. We see a lot of trans programs coming from, more cis-oriented organizations, and some of these programs are, the only TTNC person that you see is like a peer navigator on these programs and not actually managing them.
We also have Luster saying, without being able to radically provide support for housing. Did you read that? Am I reading it again? I've done that before, so. So yes, Luster says, without being able to radically provide support for housing, transportation, employment, that looks like actual safer rides, jobs, houses. It falls short what we say we are. What we are all about. So basically, Luster is making the point that without radically accessible housing, transportation, employment. In fact, Luster, one of the key findings from the needs assessment that I mentioned earlier is that employment and housing are the top two priorities. One of the top, but the top two definitely priorities of our communities. And when I say our communities, specifically for this needs assessment, it was trans people of color living with HIV. Maya Williams, trans programming should be trans-led, not cis-led. No one knows trans programming better than trans persons, 100%. May also says, something I want to look into is holding universities' housing services accountable after COVID-19 crisis. I was personally kicked out of housing and realized that there were probably tens of thousands of other queer young adults being pushed to be homeless. Is anybody else trying to organize around this?
And may remind us what area you're in as well for our collective group.
So moving on, Madison says there also needs to be some type of job security for those trans employed individuals to protect the employed and the funding for the transgender programs. And if I can add, Madison, definitely job security, but also leadership development and the different organizations call them different things, but basically a leadership development plan.
And TSC Transgender Strategy Center has a couple of programs that are specifically crafted for our Black and Brown communities within the TTNC world that really are more robust than what you may have traditionally been into, in order to give us the right type of skills in our toolbox in order to tackle our local problems and our national problems as leaders. You can go to transgenderstrategy.org. In the next upcoming weeks, you will see more information about those leadership development programs.
And I definitely recommend them, by the way.
Thank you. May is in West Michigan when talking about the housing from the universities. Anyone else near Michigan? Madison says, I agree, and they're from Jackson, Mississippi. Tyra says housing is definitely a big part of helping the trans community. Teresa gave a thumbs up exactly. Maya says there is a need for continual trans care within the government system for those trans sisters who have been discriminated upon and have been forced to take the hand of sex work as employment.
May also says, I imagine many other universities did this as well. I think May was what is referring to when they were kicked out of housing. Luster also says, in Columbus, Ohio, there are 2 community-based grassroots orgs matching folks with LGBT foster homes for students. Of course, the need is greater than the resource. And this is another thing, which doesn't necessarily, or maybe it does, relate to policy, which is how do we also educate our funders to move to basically our needs, what we need as like to be funded, and also to move from this culture of scarcity. My sister, Octavia Lewis from New York, likes to call it the crabs in the barrel. They're all trying to, to top each other, whereas there's a huge pond outside of the barrel that no one is even looking at. So looking at how can we move our funders and stakeholders to that culture of abundance for our communities. And BT also says, true, May, many are refusing to give refunds to students. We are seeing some looking for rent or housing. This is happening nationally. So basically universities, because of COVID-19, have kicked out the students and not giving them refunds, which is not okay. Quinton also says national policy needed for violence against trans, non-binary individuals. Agree to that. Ray gives their email, ray@njbuddies.org. Sorry for signing in late as I was in other words. Welcome whenever you are able to join. We are more than happy. Quinton also says, without addressing all forms of violence, our community will continue to be oppressed. And I totally agree. Jordan, I will say that since I first transitioned many years ago, things have improved as far as seeing working with other trans folks in healthcare settings, even as peer navigators, which didn't used to be the case. But yes, let's imagine even greater representation and visible leadership in our trans healthcare settings, trans program to lift each other up. And Tara says, well, yeah.
Yes, that's so important. And it's important for us to support each other and lift each other up, not only in these times, but in all times. Only together, can we have a big as a voice as possible to be heard. I see here we have something in the Q&A section there.
That's Shantae, I think.
Okay.
Yes, you have a comment saying that you're both doing a wonderful job.
Thank you. And May says, if you're interested in doing some organized action to hold universities accountable, please email them at maexzurita@gmail.com. We can connect more resources if we connect afterwards. Thank you for that. Yes, that's something that we do want to create out of this collaboration of resources and individuals and skills in order to help pass these things or help stop the atrocities that we are dealing with as a community. We are only a few minutes towards the end of our, so we're gonna go, any questions or commentary that you would like for us to capture. This is also being recorded, so all this information would be available not only to us as participants within this webinar, but for anyone else and for our extended community as well.
Just to read the last few comments, Araya. So Tara said that hopefully we can still do the trans march because that was a big help to showing the world trans are here and we're not going anywhere. I hope so too, Tara.
I know that they're planning a virtual march at the very least in light of everything that's happening. So go to their website, Trans March on DC, And I believe you can sign yourself up if you want to host a virtual march within your area. So go to that website to get more updated information.
Thanks for the info, Raya. Ray says that Newbridge Medical Center wants to start an LGBT clinic. Ray, can you tell us where the medical center is?
Yes, is that Connecticut or?
And Jade says, I truly believe a culture of collaboration will really support and elevating our community as a whole. If we are unified as a community, we can then take on structures as a more powerful movement of true change. Ray says, we thought that we should focus on trans health. Do you have any good resources? I think that was a continuation of the Newbridge Medical Center wants to start an LGBT clinic. We thought that we should focus on trans health. Do you have any good resources? Ray, would you like to share your email so that folks on the call, folks who have good resources can?
And the email is there, ray@njbuddies.org. Everyone send your trans health resources to RAY, @njbuddies.org.
Cool.
So we have a question in the question box. We said, someone mentioned trans leadership trainings and a website. Could you please repeat that website address and perhaps type it in the chat?
That would be transgenderstrategy.org.
Yeah.
I'm going to type it in there as well.
Jordan, thank you for attending and for your amazing contributions.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Tyra, as well.
Heather.
Ray put the actual website, AIDSWatch.org, a virtual walk in Paramus, New Jersey. Check out radremedy.org, Jen put, for a national database of trans competent providers. So Ray, go to radremedy.org right under your comment. You're welcome, Jordan, and you're welcome, Heather.
Araya, are we,
Yes.
you want to close?
Yes, so we have here our quote that transgender rights are civil rights and our nation's laws should reflect this. Tell Congress to enact legislation to amend Title, which is cut off right here, 7 of the Civil Rights Act to provide explicit protection for transgender people from employment and other forms of discrimination. We have here AIDSWatch, and we have a link here, which is bit.ly/AW2020 Civil Rights.
And all of that has been copied into the chat box for everyone. If you'd like to use that, share that out in any way.
I am tweeting as we speak.
Yes, perfect. And you can tweet this as well on Twitter or share it on your other social platforms. I really appreciate everyone who was able to, virtually meet with us as a community and put out there some of the policy work that we want funders and leaders in our own community to really know more about and to, work more on so that we can achieve that trans liberation for us, which is so very important. And I want to thank Carson for helping us out there at AIDS United. And Sophia, thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too, sister.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And I love everyone that is on here. I see. Thank you, Julio. Thank you, Taviana. Thank you, Tyra, Terry, Ray, Jade. Yes, thank you, thank you. Love you all. Please take good care of yourselves and, take a little break before your next session. Maya says, yes, please check out NJCRI Project on Facebook and Instagram.
Will do, Maya.
Larry, love you too, brother.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's it. And you can contact us if any other questions, and enjoy your virtual day at AIDSWatch, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
attending.